The Court of Appeal ruling on the Epping Junction is a turning point in the battle over the asylum hotels. I'm not sure whether it's the right turning point, and I know there'll be people who would be surprised that I draw that conclusion. 3 senior judges have effectively told local councils that planning law cannot be used as a blunt weapon to eject asylum seekers on the back of noisy street protests. Lord Justice Bean's words were precise. If unrest is treated as a reason to grant injunctions, councils everywhere will be tempted to invite or at least tolerate protest as a legal strategy. I don't think that's the reason the injunction was granted. In other words, the High Court's approach risked turning mob pressure into quasi-law. That is reasonable. But the real issue is whether or not the hotels are being used for the right purpose. The court also re-established the Home Secretary's centrality. Yvette Cooper, whether Conservative councillors like it or not, has the statutory duty to prevent asylum seekers being left destitute. That obligation outweighs parish politics. I agree entirely that the law should not be based on mob rule, and that Yvette Cooper, or the Home Secretary, whoever that happens to be at the time, has a duty to ensure that asylum seekers are not destitute. But none of that answers the question about whether or not hotels can be redesignated as asylum centres. The political fallout here, councils such as Epping feel betrayed. Councillors like Chris and Holly Whitbread are vowing to fight on in October. This ensures months of further agitation. There's local unrest. Union Jacks and England flags outside the Bell Hotel signal how quickly this has become a stage for nationalist performance. The judgment may quiet litigation, but it inflames protest, and Badenoch, Cleverly, Jenrick and Philp are in chorus, each painting Labour as siding with illegal migrants over local people. It's clever framing. It ignores the legal fact asylum seekers are not illegal until their claims are rejected, and Badenoch, Cleverly, Jenrick and Philp were part of the government that set up the asylum hotels in the first place. The government line is, so Cooper and Dame Angela Eagle stress that hotels are temporary, that they've halved the use of hotels since 2023 and will close them by 2029. The rhetoric is control and order, exit without chaos, and closing the hotels by next year by granting temporary status to those most likely to win claims anyway. That, of course, would incense the right, but that is the right way forward. And that is the proposal by the Refugee Council. And local councils can still argue planning breach in October, but the appeal court has clipped their wings. The legal high ground is narrowing. I think local councils would be right to argue that there's a planning breach. What that would achieve, given this appeal court ruling, I think is difficult to say. The appeal court ruling is looking at the wider picture of the protests, which, of course, the injunction has to be seen within that context. I think the protests are an irrelevance to the serious issue. The serious issue is that the hotels have been used inappropriately. The planning permission that underpins the hotels as hotels is abused. The case sets precedent, however. Other councils will think twice before launching similar injunctions. The cost and the futility are now clear. The Conservatives, though, will play this politically, casting Labour as judicially powerful but democratically deaf. And in Epping, the hotel stands, the asylum seekers stay, and the flags flutter outside the gate. But the appeal judges have made it very clear that the protests have weighed against the injunction rather than in favour of the injunction. The protests are the thing that have caused the legal problem, and I think that's an interesting that's an interesting take. I think the Refugee Council's proposal would be the right proposal, and it would still leave those migrants whose cases are undecided. It would still leave those in a hotel type situation. But it would leave presumably less of those in that situation, and particularly if there were a fast-tracked process of appeal, then that period would be reduced even further. So the Refugee Council plus the government's current plans seem to me to be going in the right direction. I think they would be greatly helped by a rethinking of the 1951 Refugee Convention, because none of this is going to stop that tide of refugees coming across the Channel, unless there are safe and legal routes set in place. But even then, those Channel crossings and the trade of those Channel crossings has now become a fixed asset in the smugglers' calendar and trading methodology, and that needs to be rooted out and destroyed. But doing that will be very difficult, particularly given the fact that smugglers don't go around the place with the word smuggler etched across their forehead. Sadly, a lot of smugglers and traffickers are the village and town elite, the people who ordinary individuals will turn to for help, and they will find themselves propelled into the smuggler's arms without knowing that they're doing something that is foolish or wrong or illegal. They will not know that, which means we need to be getting a better message across. This is that there needs to be a route into Europe, into Britain, into other countries that is clear. The problem at the moment is that there is no clarity, and when somebody is facing a war-torn situation or drought or no job, they need to know that there are options. And we, similarly, in the north of Europe, need to make it clear that economic migration is not one of those options without meeting specific targets. So without being able to offer the sort of work that is required. And we haven't done this. We haven't looked at this. We haven't looked at revising the 1951 Refugee Convention, and we should do. We should do. And without that, in the end, all we're doing is a sort of King Canute job. King Canute didn't do it in the first place because it's not possible to push the tide back. It's a futile effort, and that's the point. And the Home Office is engaged in futility, and its approach under Theresa May and David Blunkett was to simply do a sort of Obelix type thing. Well, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to hold my breath until it goes away. It doesn't go away. You've got to deal with it. It's reality. It's like taxes.